How is a more severe injury actually good news for Ohio State? I don't know. We're going to try and figure that out on Snap Judgments. They're brought to you by Buyers Auto. That is Doug Lesmerises. I am Austin Ward. It is a Woody Wednesday. And before we could get into anything else, we had to talk to Marvin Harrison Jr. about his ankle, Doug.
And Bill's just under the weather. He's not fired or anything.
No, he's alive, I think.
He's alive. We'll go check on him after the show. So, yeah, I mean, right, that was top of your list, top of everybody's list. How is Marvin Harrison Jr.? And like on a scale of 1 to 10, the news for Ohio State fans, like it's not a 10 out of 10. Awesome. He's definitely fine. But it's not a 1, oh no, he can't be himself. Like right. he was like, it's good enough. Is that not the quote?
He said, and I had to double check because I wanted to make absolutely sure, because the question was like, did you feel okay? Were you on the adrenaline? And I just wanted to get to it. How is it more severe than the one that you played on last year? And he said, yes. I think it's worse.
Yeah.
But it's good enough I can play on it.
Yeah.
And that's like hard to parse. But we also know that he dealt with it all last year and like was pretty darn good.
And it's interesting that we ended up having that conversation with him a couple weeks ago about the fact like, oh, you did? Oh, that season was with an injured right ankle, and it is the right ankle again, right? He basically said it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit worse than the same thing, but you saw what he did last year. He did say, maybe in practice, you're not taking every rep, you're not straining for every deep ball, why push it? So it is affecting him, but it's not going to stop him from being Marv.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a little bit over the last couple of weeks with like, okay, there was a little bit of a knee. He took some reps off during training camp. Ohio State doesn't need to push it. We know that he had the ankle last year. He's worked through some of the ability to not cut and still be as effective as he wants. Had the non-contact jersey on after the big hit at Indiana. So like, it's not new. I think some of the stuff with like the toughness with Marvin gets overlooked, that we see how great he is. He puts in all the extra work and like he must have always been doing it, because how could you not play? You have to be full strength to be playing at the high level that he was. And that I don't think has really been the case for him, or at least he doesn't feel that way. He's also never made excuses about it, but he's continued to play through these things. And the end result of that is I don't think he's concerned about it at all. But I would be, because you're talking about one of the, if not the best wide receiver in the country, one of the best college football players in the country.
It doesn't seem like he doubts his ability to manage it, right? Is he going to be 100% Marvin Harrison Jr.? Maybe not. But then again, we get into that, well, who is 100%?
Sure.
I do think two things here. One is I think he's like almost proud. He said he was proud of the block, and that the injury came on a block, I think almost is like a badge for him, right? Yeah. Like wasn't on a one-handed catch. And then I did ask him, and sometimes you have to ask people questions just to see what they say. It's not that you're questioning them, it's you want to see the answer. So I just asked like, hey man, like you're going to be in the NFL and make a lot of money. Like, is that in your head at all as you're getting hurt or as you're going through this? And he was like almost offended at the question. Like, no, I didn't think about that at all. I'm just thinking about trying to help my team win a game. And it was an extended answer. And I thought it was a good answer. But in just the world, the way it is, man, right? I mean, I think it's worth putting out there to let a guy like that, who is this far away from being a millionaire a bunch of times over, put on the record, like, that's not even in my head.
Yeah, and I think that especially because Ohio State fans specifically just went through this with Jackson Smith-Njigba last year. And, Berman and I had conversations with him, and he wanted to talk publicly about his efforts to come back and a lot of the process that he went through before Iowa. Like, he was not opting out. That was never, I know that was a big topic of conversation. Yeah. And that was never his intent or desire or will or any part of it. He was doing a lot of things behind the scenes to get back out there. His injury was more severe than anything Marvin had then or Marvin has now. But the only reason that we wanted him to talk about it publicly was because Jackson, he's the only one that can say that, how he feels, what he's doing, what he's putting his body through to get back out there. So when you ask the question to Marvin, and somebody also asked me this on the text earlier, like, why are you so worried about getting these guys on the record? Well, it's because the availability report and the coaches can't really speak for what they're feeling, what they're going through, how much they want to play, any of that stuff. A lot of times the players want to make that clear. And in an example like this, and what you're talking about, like Marvin's desire to be out there and win that game and to stay out there and play again this week and next week, like he should be able to get that out there so that people know it and don't question it. And they can't because he was fighting for his helmet at Notre Dame 2 weeks ago.
Right.
But that's a little bit of why there were the number of questions to Marvin about that tonight, and why, at least why I felt it was important, and why you did as well.
And I think Ohio State fans should feel good about where he is. I do think it's going to be that thing, though, where if his right ankle gets rolled up again, everyone's going to take a breath, right? Sure. I mean, I think we're all going to have all eyes on the ankle, but where it is now, it doesn't feel like it's going to prevent him from doing the things that he wants to do or that people expect him to do.
All right, so that's the big news from the night on a Woody Wednesday. Doug, what else had your attention in here?
So, we're talking about, we got like 10 or 11 guys tonight.
It was a good list.
The conversation that Jim Knowles had on Tuesday about the linebacker play at Notre Dame, Tommy Eichenberg wasn't on the list, but Steele Chambers was. So getting a chance to sort of ask Steele Chambers, like, how do you think you guys played against Notre Dame? And he said, we didn't play very well at all. So he and Tommy are so tight. I mean, I think he can speak for them. And he thought that their eyes were bad, right, in terms of some of the motion that Notre Dame was using. And Jim Knowles talked about that. He did think that led to them not making the right run fits at times, not being in the right gaps. That seemed to be an issue that a lot of people watching the game thought they saw. He agreed with it.
Yeah.
So it's one of these things, like, you have to be able to have a conversation. Jim Knowles had the conversation. Steele Chambers confirmed it. The linebackers didn't play well. So lay that down and now see what's next. But they're not trying to hide from that. And I wanted to see how Steele reacted to it. I don't think we're surprised that he's a guy who's going to say, yeah, no, we didn't play well at all.
Yeah, he's very accountable when it comes to that part. And it may not even be that instructive for Saturday against Maryland. By the way, buried the lead there, Saturday noon, undefeated Maryland coming to town. Like, the way that Maryland is going to try and attack Ohio State is not going to be the same, and it can't really be the same as what Notre Dame did, because a lot of some of that eye discipline was caused by a very good running back in one of the better offensive lines in the country.
Yeah,
like, Maryland doesn't have that.
No.
But the challenge, it will still be a challenge of, coordination and eye control and all that for Tommy and Steele, because the ball's going to be zipping around in different directions. So the challenge is different in the way that Maryland will attack, but not different in you're going to have to bounce back and be sharper with your assignments maybe than. It's been a long time since you could say that Tommy and Steele maybe did not play at a level that Ohio State wants.
Yeah.
And the fact that they still won that game the way they did is a little bit remarkable, but that's the growth process. You have to correct it. You have to get ready for, Talia Tagovailoa and a passing attack there's going to be misdirection. And we've seen Maryland actually scheme some things up against Ohio State in several of these matchups. Like, you're not going to have a functioning defense without your two linebackers playing at a high level. And
it does feel like just the defensive guys, it's really more about the off-platform stuff with Tagovailoa, that the broken plays when he gets out of the pocket, they again, Jim Knowles said a coordinated rush, don't let him escape, but he is going to escape at times. I do think that probably is where he's going to be the most dangerous. And I did, like, Denzel Burke, who is playing seemingly as well as any corner in the country, is kind of tired of people not throwing at him. So he was sort of like, he said like it was around like the second quarter against Notre Dame that he realized, they're not going to really throw at me tonight. And he said, like, I want production. He wants Maryland to throw at him. So he's hoping, he wants to face a better passing attack, because this is a guy who wants to have a chance to make plays. But I do think those plays, like he said, you got to be plastered, right? When the quarterback breaks the pocket, you got to stick with your guy, defend as long as he's willing to stay alive. And I do think, Steele said this, he thinks this defense is more prepared schematically, but also talent. Steele said, we got a lot of great athletes. I do think, do you agree that this is a defense that is maybe built to handle a quarterback who can get out of the pocket?
Yeah, I would think so. If you look at, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, like, what are they most likely to do best? Like, probably contain the pocket. And if they do get away, both of those guys are athletic enough to run down most quarterbacks. Yeah. And I don't think that Talia Tagovailoa is going to be one who runs away from that. Now, he may make some plays with his legs, but when you're talking about the athleticism of those two guys on the edge, if we see a full Mike Hall game, Tyleik Williams playing with a higher motor plus Steele Chambers running around like they're linebacker, like it is everybody. It is all 11. So I could keep going down the list, but the way that Denzel Burke talked about it, the way that Jordan Hancock talked about their responsibilities, and the way Cody Simon came off of a route to play, like, they've talked about this a lot, what they're going to see, what they think they're going to see from Maryland. I think they're probably more equipped to handle this than maybe they were for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right or wrong read, but like, some of this talk this week, Doug, has been like, is Talia going to be one of the best quarterbacks they face? Is this going to be a Maryland attack that can really zip it up? And, I'm not to that point personally. But like, I kind of look at this and I feel like last year's game was an aberration and that Ohio State's really going to bottle them up. I just think this is the kind of game that favors them when the secondary is playing at the level they are. And if the pass rush is better than I've been giving it credit for, Maryland's offensive line, I don't think is going to be in for a very good day either. So that might tell you a little bit where my head is for this matchup by Saturday, but I feel like all the matchups lend themselves to Ohio State winning them.
They took away what Sam Hartman liked to do best, which is take those deep shots. To take away what Talia Tagovailoa wants to do best, which is get out of the pocket and make plays. I think they are equipped to do that. You want to talk about Chip pushing people in the butt?
You capped it off. Like, and then I asked him afterwards, like, I mean, should Chip be the pusher or should he take the snap? Because he squats more than Kyle McCord.
His eyes were like, Chip taking the snap. He was like, yes, tell Ryan Day.
It's just like what I did in the spring where I spoke it into existence. And I'm like, well, make him a fullback and a tight end. Like, let him do whatever he wants. I'm just going to keep driving the Chip bandwagon here. The Chip train him. I didn't want to do it, but
you did it.
I had to.
It's on the record. They all saw it. You said it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the push, it's there.
I said, how would you feel if called upon to push your quarterback? And he said, I'd push him all the way into the end zone. Like he was down, man. But I just think, again, Bill Landis and I did a whole Kings of Columbus this week on that went up on Wednesday, like what they should do in short yardage. And I reminded Chip of this today. I did a survey last spring when he was still a linebacker of like, who's this? The superlatives in the linebacker room. And all the linebackers said he was the fastest linebacker and the strongest linebacker. This guy is a rare athlete.
He is.
We're seeing a little bit of that, I think, in his role. But whether you want him pushing Kyle, whether you want Mayan Williams pushing Chip, whether you just want Chip to take the snap and dive over the pile, like I think this guy could be, for a team that has had short yardage issues, I think he could be, with some unique usage, a bit of a goal line solution.
Yeah, he could provide one, or he could complicate it, right? Like I remember being in this case, in this headspace, like in 2018, like when Urban Meyer would describe it and be like, well, we don't go under center, we don't practice it. Here's the reason, exposure and all. Like, I'd be like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Like quarterback sneak seems like it should be easy. You can line up and just do it. Like everyone should be able to do it. I mean, I had to do it in 8th grade. Like anybody who's played football at any level has seen a quarterback sneak be part of their offense. Like, so I can understand both sides of it, but I almost feel like if you're going to telegraph that that's what you're going to do, then Ohio State's going right back to some of the stuff which I've criticized, which would be making it too obvious what you're going to do. Now, you should maybe probably execute that play regardless. Like everybody knows that Jalen Hurts is going to do it. And the brotherly shove is working just fine. So I'm of two minds on it because I think Marvin and Emeka just have to be on the field.
So the Eagles have been calling that, right, the brotherly shove and the tush push. I just accidentally came up with the Ohio State name the other day. The Kyle Pile. Let's make a Kyle Pile. Get everybody in there.
Okay.
Push the Kyle Pile forward.
Or, the Buck train. I don't know. We can work on it. Somebody's got to do it. But that was a little bit of a lighthearted way to end it for something that's a very serious topic for Ohio State. There'll be probably more conversation about that later on this week. Anything else that jumped out to you, Doug?
So Chip talked after the game at Notre Dame?
He did, yeah.
Okay.
It was a scattered, difficult situation because there were some people outside of this closet we were in. And anyway, he did talk after the game.
So obviously you and Berm were there and Landis and I were not. But in just watching, I asked him if he'd watched the replay of the play. And he said, yeah, I've watched it a bunch of times, but I really have watched my teammates react and everyone run on the field. But I just thought in watching that it looked to me like his leg and his knee were going to go down short of the goal line. And I don't know what he did to keep his knee up. So I asked him basically that. And he said, it felt fast and slow to me. But as I was falling, I just said to myself, keep your knees up. And I swear to God, like I got chills about that this is a guy, there's how many Notre Dame guys on his back.
Yeah.
He's falling. The game is on the line. And he's thinking to himself, keep your knees up. It's like he willed his knees to stay up.
It was close.
Because they were going, and then they came back up. And like he just, like you spoke it into existence to make him play this position. He thought it into existence to stay up. So again, he realized it. I like to see young guys like this have a moment to realize you're in the history books.
Yeah.
People are going to be talking about Chip Trayanum. We're talking about Kyle McCord's 3rd and 19, and Emeka Egbuka. Like, whatever happens for the rest of their careers, people will remember that. And I thought Chip gave us a little bit of that tonight. He's not satisfied. He had a great quote. He said he told Tony Alford, I didn't come here for one moment. I came here for a bunch of moments.
Right.
Which is, again, a fan. Chip is he's a dude.
There's a lot of things that he said that you can take apart, like that show you why he's so valuable in this locker room behind here. Like, he's like, did you expect to be a leader? And he was like, oh, quite frankly, yeah. Like, if you come to a bunch of alphas and you think you're an alpha, like, you're going to find out if you are or not. And like, he clearly is. And everybody in this building feels like he is. That's why.
Somebody the other day said if there were 4 captains, he'd be the 4th captain.
It's great that you have people like Chip Trayanum and Emeka Egbuka who carry themselves as captains and don't have that. Like, you have 12 to 16 people on this leadership committee, and you could make a case for all of them. It's a little bit unfortunate for them. I'm sure they don't care. But if you're going down through the Ohio State record books and you're like, well, who are the captains that year? Like, well, there were only 3. And it was because, Tommy and Cade are so high up and got so many votes. It's like, well, all right, well, that's what they're going to do. But it did leave some guys out who are really important leaders to this team. And you can see that that's Chip. I mean, they put the game in this, not the season necessarily, but the most important game of the year in his hands with one snap, one play, and he answered the bell. Like, they trust him to do that stuff.
And someone did ask, what if Notre Dame had 11 on the field? And he said, same thing would have happened.
Yeah. Well, and I think I thought about it, and I don't know the answer. I've asked a lot of people, like, it seemed like it made it more complicated for Josh Simmons because he's like, he didn't have his assignment. The guy wasn't there. And it did make it a little bit more complicated for Chip. And he talked about that as well. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, that got a little confusing.
Yeah.
And I think the play may have been executed more easily if Josh Simmons had somewhere to go instead of just like,
it would have been great if Josh Simmons had run to the Notre Dame sideline and been like, you're supposed to be in the game. I'm blocking you.
Here's my guy. The other part that I wanted to get to, Doug, was, he walked over and sat down, and the Ohio State tight end, Cade Stover, I said, well, I'm just going to get this out of the way. Like, you were pretty banged up leaving Notre Dame Stadium. He had some ice on his knee. Tonight, his ankle was taped up. I'm like, just for your sake, I'm going to do this right now. We'll be done. Did you need the week off? Are you fine? I'm fine. Leave me alone. Okay. Cool. Now,
all good.
I know that he did need some time to recover. I also know that he was never going to publicly say, I'm hurt, I'm banged up, because he didn't last year when he had the hip injury and some of the perimeter blocking was struggling. Like, he's never, ever going to make excuses. So he's the opposite example of Marvin, where Marvin wants to talk about it. He's going to be open about it. Here's the recovery process. No, I'm not going to let it affect me. Cade's approach is different in that we know he's going to approach it the same way on the field, but in here, he's not ever going to talk about it. And that's fine too. You should at least give them the opportunity. Yeah.
And again, it's a reminder, which is why it's fun to do this, that they missed Marvin and Cade so much when they weren't in the Georgia game. And those two guys come at it from like such different experiences, such different viewpoints. But the bottom line is they're both in their own way irreplaceable in the Ohio State offense, both on and off the field with what they do.
Tell me how crazy this might sound, Doug. I mean, I think Cade is probably more indispensable to the Ohio State offense than Marvin. And I'm going to get a ton of criticism for
Austin
it.
Ward
I know.
Said that.
And I understand, and I will understand the hatred for it. I get it completely. I am not saying that Cade is the best tight end in the country, the way that Marvin is the best wide receiver in the country. Would Ohio State be more equipped to handle an absence of Marvin than Cade? I think so.
It's the quality of the backup, right? Which is what gets to everything. It's like good, you might get Carnell Tate into pretty good shape at some point to play some version of Marvin. I don't know that you'd get Jelani Thurman into shape to play some version of Cade right now. And it doesn't mean that Joe Royer and G. Scott aren't good players, but I would still say Marv, just because he is so rare and he demands such attention. And I think there's some version of like, the Ted Ginn Jr. argument from the 2006 national title game of once you take him off the field especially for an extended period of time, like it's just the whole defense plays you differently.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think there's an argument there. But this might be worth asking like our tech subscribers about. This could be a good discussion.
What's the number that they should hit
If
up?
you want to be a tech subscriber, 2-week free trial, you send a text to 614-662-4509. You get a thing back to sign up, but you don't get charged for 2 weeks. So if you don't like it, you can just type stop and you're out.
And then you can go right there and you can text directly to me to tell me how wrong I am.
It's the best part of it.
The real issue for me, Doug, is that I said this like over the summer that like they could lose Marvin the same way they did Jackson. Like the offense would probably be fine because of the wide receivers. And I didn't learn my lesson. I just went ahead and I did it again. I didn't even know that was going to happen.
You didn't have such a direct route to the criticism. But it's coming now, baby.
Yeah. So
paying for that right.
So you can bring that on. But like the tight ends are so important to the Ohio State offense. Like, and once Cade went down in that game, it was compounded without Marvin, of course. And I understand your point is a good one. Like if teams no longer have to put bracket coverage and double Marvin for an entire game, like that's going to change things for Emeka. It's going to change things for Julian. And, there were other issues and other things at play that were hampering Ohio State in the Peach Bowl. But the fact that both of them were missing, like that's what really was the issue. Like they're both critical cogs.
Yeah. And I'm sure, I bet Ryan Day could sit down and draw an entire thing of like how these guys fit together, this player, this skill set, and this position, and why when you combine them perfectly. But there is a version of like, for what the Ohio State offense wants to be, you need a Marvin, you need a Cade, like in some version. But when you don't have both, you certainly notice it.
Yeah, and I wonder, because we've spent, maybe this will be a topic for another day and not Snap Judgments brought to you by Buyers Auto, but like some of this bracket coverage and the attention on Marvin, maybe that's not necessarily going directly to Julian Fleming or Emeka Egbuka. You look at the numbers and the statistical production, the record-setting pace that Cade Stover's on, like that could easily be part of it as well. That the biggest beneficiary of this so far has been Cade. And then if teams adjust and they say, well, we're not going to let the tight end beat us now, well, then what? I mean, it's a complementary piece that's really working.
Yeah. And by the way, and we'll talk about this more on shows later in the week, like Maryland hasn't played any good offenses yet.
Sure haven't.
So that might be a thing that they're going to have to really try to figure out on Saturday.
We will definitely be talking about that later on. We've got all the coverage that you've come to expect, some tweaks we're going to do to our picks show. So stay tuned for that. If you've been enjoying it already, a lot of those same features will be there. Buckeye Q, the podcast daily, bold predictions. Is there more Kings coming this week? What do we got left?
The big thing is the big Kings of Columbus went up on Wednesday, like a 45-minute dive on short yardage, the stats, how they compare to past Ohio State success in short yardage compared to other teams in the country. Of the top 11 teams in the AP poll, Ohio State is 10th in third and short conversion rate, which is not great. And so we just tried to figure out, should they sneak more? Should they throw more? Long discussion. Me and Landis covered that on Wednesday.
All right. So all of that is on the podcast. Full coverage leading up to Saturday at noon. Ohio State and mighty, massive, undefeated Maryland. One of the biggest games of the college football season.
Listen. I think Burr was throwing out adjectives for a thing. We just have to call them 5-0 Maryland because that is a fact.
That is, yeah.
Everything else gets a little pejorative of like, what do we mean by this adjective? But undefeated is just true.
They are 5-0.
It's just true.
And they're coming to the Horseshoe. That's also true. That's going to be on Saturday. And then we'll have all the coverage of Ohio State and Maryland, a eternal fight, as it were, this weekend. So that's coming on the podcast. Thanks for joining us for some Snap Judgments. They are presented by Buyers Auto. He is Doug. I am Austin. We will talk to you later.